Yay Networks.
How do you date in a culture that doesn't want to commit? Because I feel like that's very, like, we're having like a pandemic of that.
Let's reframe.
Okay.
Because I know what you mean. Like, I get it. I was in the trenches. I dated in New York, LA, and Miami. It's like, woof, sign me up. And then San Diego, it's like, yikes.
Did you try like middle America?
I know.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
I'm stoked. I am so stoked. You are, like, I look forward to your post every fucking day that I feel a little bit like I'm a stalker. But honestly, for anyone who's out there watching or listening, if you need any dating advice, because I feel like now, like, there's so much content, right? Whether you're like an entrepreneur or like health and wellness or dating, whatever it is, whatever lifestyle category you fall under, there's so much information. And I have to say, for dating advice, the only person you need to follow is Do the Work podcast with Sabrina.
I would have died if you were like, the only person you should, and it's just some total random person. You're like, you're the second person. Awesome.
I'm glad you get my humor. Now we could really fuck with each other during this podcast.
100%. Oh, dude. Well, thank you for having me. And I'm so stoked to even be able to like be here and talk to you about all the fun shit that is dating.
Yeah.
And relationships.
Yeah. So let's talk about, can we just like briefly touch on your dating, like a synopsis? We don't have to go down like the rabbit hole, but I want to, like, you're in a relationship and you've announced his name, Ryan, right? Yeah. This is so weird. I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I know your boyfriend.
You're like,
I've never met.
His dog's Kobe, right? You're like, I don't know anything about them or anything like that.
Yeah. Because I think it's really important to like have context behind who you're getting advice from.
Totally. I was the poster child for issues. Like, I was that girl that for years, everyone's like, I don't understand. What's your problem? Like, you're smart, you're beautiful, you've got all those things. And it was like, I was my problem. Like, I was in my own way. I had such high anxiety. Look up anxious attachment. It's like, there's my photo. Because for years, it was the type of thing like unresolved childhood trauma and not understanding that, like, from a young age, I was boy crazy. And it's like, I was attention seeking and nobody really saw that. And I have my mom who has had so much trauma in her life. She did not know how to be a parent in the way that I think she had 3 children that needed her. My father is a raging narcissist who's incredibly just in his own world, we'll just say. And so I was a byproduct of that. And my experiences were like moving to New York when I was 18, not knowing anything and like learning very quick.
Where'd you grow up?
Florida.
Okay.
So I'm from South Florida originally. All of my life, my dad had businesses in New York. So we were always there. When each one of us turned 18, we all moved to New York.
Because you have that like natural East Coast vibe.
It's definitely not from here. Definitely not a Californian. And so it's like, it's the fast talk. It's the like saying fuck all the time and just being very like blunt and direct. Like I grew up in New York is kind of what I say. And I was just a hot fucking mess in my dating life. I was like dating, they were all the same. They were all super unavailable, super narcissistic, or emotionally this, or I would use my body to connect. And so I'd be like, oh, if they sleep with me, like, then they're going to fall in love with me. And so it would be like after 2 hours of date, I'd be like, you want to come back to my house? Thinking this naive, 22-year-old. And then I ended up like, it was just that on repeat, just dating one guy after another that just like very clearly was not for me, and me not understanding, having so much anxiety. If I made a text back within like 2 minutes, that was it. I was creating every narrative. I was going through like, that's it. This person can't stand me. Like going so catastrophized and spiraling and using all those thought processes that when I ended up the fall off, like that real rock bottom for me was when I married my father. Like I was literally, he was the same person, the same age, the same demographics, like everything was so creepy. And I was on the outside, everyone thought, oh my God, you guys are the couple goals and you guys are so amazing. Like to the point where like his friend said that to us at brunch. Little did they know that morning we broke up. And I was a shell of a human. I had lost like 30 pounds from me now, which is scary.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
To the point where people were asking like, are you okay?
Yeah.
There was no hiding it anymore. Everyone's like, hey, something's going on. And I started therapy. And it took me, that was that journey. That was 2018, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I started really understanding like, oh, okay, so my anxiety is what's causing the issues here. Like I am not choosing people. I'm waiting for them to choose me. I'm coming from a place of scarcity. I'm coming from a place of lack. I'm coming from a place of not good enough. And it wasn't until I understood like, love yourself. It's like, it's not a cheesy saying. It's actually like knowing yourself and accepting yourself. And then once I was able to do that, I was able to show up differently, date differently, seeing things progress. And then that's how I ended up leaving the people that weren't working for me and then welcoming into my life my current partner, who is the best thing for me on this planet, but never what I thought I would have wanted.
What, just characteristics, physical, all of it, like head to toe.
Every guy I dated looked the fucking same. They were like 6'4", tattooed, 6-pack. Like even my friends, I was in New York recently with my best friend, and I was like, I feel like I dated that guy. And she just turns around, and she's like, yep, nope, that looks like, no, check out.
They all start looking the same.
To the point where even my mom, she was like, this is creepy. They look the same. She's like, but they're different names. So that's my type. And very dismissive of my emotions. I was scared to say anything. It was very that dynamic of like just waiting for them to pick me. And Ryan, I love him, but like he's not physically he's very attractive, but he's just not the normal. Like when my sister saw his photo, the first thing she said was like, that's not your type. And I was like, I know. And I was like, probably for the best. And like when I first met him, we were very much a traditional like couple these days. Like we met on Hinge, we had sex on the first date, and I left being like, I'm never going to see this guy again. Because I just, in my head, I was like, if you sleep with someone on the first date, Sabrina, like, they're not going to take you seriously.
Yeah.
Then the next day, he messaged me like, that was amazing. I still have a smile on my face. I want to see you again. And I was like, did you get paid? Like, what do you mean? You want to
new phone, who dis?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, she's confused. And we went through our trials and tribulations. Like, he's not a texter. And that challenged me in so many ways because my anxiety was like, hey, he doesn't like you. And that's that narrative, like, if he wanted to, he would. And all of this garbage advice that we receive on the internet is like, it's very black and white. And when we think about healing and like really being in a relationship, it's a bunch of shades, right?
So while you were healing, did you continue dating?
Oh, absolutely.
Because a lot of people and different people have different perspectives. They're like, no, you need to take a year off. Coming out of my 7-year relationship, they're like, and I'm like, a year, like, that doesn't seem fair. Like, it doesn't seem fair. I feel like I could do the work, no pun intended, and still
like put yourself out there.
Yeah, put myself out there, because like putting myself out there while I'm doing the work also helps me go through these little tests. Like, oh, you failed that one. Like, now we're going to be more self-conscious next time we go out on a date, or next time we pick up the phone when he hasn't texted me back, or whatever the dialogue is in between my ears. Like, it's good. So that's why I was curious.
I'm a firm believer. Like, first of all, who's addressing healed, right? Like, who's out there being like, you've passed that test. It's like, I'm not fucking doing that. I don't have the time. So for me, it's like, I think there's an element of being alone is important, right? Like, understanding yourself. And okay, so you got out of a 7-year marriage. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't suggest like there's one.
Well, we weren't married, sorry.
Or whatever, like
relationship.
Nonetheless, like, might well fucking been a marriage. But like, there's one creator and it's like, she's lovely, but like, she found out her fiance cheated on her. And then the next day, literally like posted a video about it and was like, my fiance cheated on me. And it was like this whole thing. And then 2 days later was like, so I'm going on a first date. And it was like, whoa. You haven't even processed what happened. Yeah. And it's like, and hey, that's her journey. I don't give a shit. You go live your life. But there has to be a moment of taking stock of, like, one of the questions I love to ask people on dates is like, I'll ask you, what is something that you used to accept in a relationship that you're no longer willing to? Curious. Someone that says something and doesn't actually do it. That's become a big thing for me. So consistency.
Consistency for sure.
You say what you mean what you say, follow through. And it's like, that's something where it's like, cool. And if I were to probe it, I'm like, oh yeah. And you're like, hey, so here's my experience with it. I used to allow it and I'm no longer willing to. That shows growth. That shows that you've spent time with yourself. That shows that you've been introspective, that you have self-awareness. These things that are so important. So it's like, yeah, I think waiting a year. Well, who said that a year is going to do it? Because it's not time. What you do with the time is what matters. I could sit here for 6 years and pine over somebody versus I can spend 6 months or a month and be like processing it, accepting it, acknowledging my part in it and being like, all right, I'm ready. I'm ready to move on with my life.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how's that been going for you?
The consistency?
The dating.
Oh, the dating. Good. So I started my last relationship, by the way. So when I started this podcast, I was like, it's called Happily Ever Amber because I was in a 8-year marriage that was very public and a shitstorm. And now I'm like co-parenting, and some days are great and some days are not. And that's just life. And then I, got into this relationship, got engaged a year. What was it, like a year into it? And then 7 years later, we ended up, I ended up leaving the relationship. And it's very strange for me because I've never dated. And that's why I think like I instantly was so attracted to your podcast and your belief system because I feel like I'm very much aligned with your values when it comes to dating. And I was like, it's like learning to walk again. So I got married at 19.
Oh shit, you were a baby.
I was a baby. I left the house, like grew up Mormon, left the house, right? Moved to New York, came back to LA, got married, and then got out of that relationship marriage at like 25, 26, I don't know, something like that. And then 7 years later, now I'm 35 and I'm like, oh shit, I feel like it. Like some days I feel like a teenager and I'm like, how do you date? And then I'm like, I want to go online and date and I'm like terrified. And then you hear all these horror stories. So I prefer dating through like word of mouth.
Yeah.
I was dating a few people and now I'm literally like, I'm just dating one person. And it's like, I feel like it's manageable for me because I am, I have my kids the majority of the time and, acting and doing the podcast. And it's like the hat on top of the hat of the, you only have space for so much. Right. And also healing myself at the same time, which I'm actually doing for the first time, like really doing the work and not just saying I'm healing myself and like going for a walk. Like I'm getting really comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I was literally talking to my mom about that on my drive up because we were talking about this mentality now that I think is really kind of running rampant of like this discomfort with anything that's not happy and fluffy and fun. Of just, it's like, oh no, I can't handle rejection. It's like, but we have a full spectrum of emotions as humans. If you're so terrified of, oh no, I can't feel sad, I can't feel rejected. It's like, so what you're doing is you're limiting yourself for your experiences because we need to be feeling all of them. And that includes like what growth, right? When you grew up, your bones were stretching. That was uncomfortable. Yeah. Anytime you're pregnant, you're growing, it's uncomfortable. There's a lot of things that require discomfort. And to me, it's such a superpower to be able to sit in it. And like you said, normally just to be like, oh, I'm just going to go for a walk and then not realize that the entire walk that you're on, you're spiraling and you're ruminating. Right. And you're stuck in this pattern versus I'm going to go for a walk. While I'm doing that, I'm going to make it really mindful because I'm going to be in touch with my body. And a lot of people don't understand that to feel better, the first step is to feel. It's not to intellectualize. You can listen to every podcast and every book and do all of that and know it. But that's like me saying, I know how to perform surgery, but I've never actually performed the surgery. Right. Exactly. And I think a lot of people do, like, to take it a step further is, so I had a couple really bad dating experience or dates, one in particular, where I drank too much because I was so nervous. I couldn't, like, the drinking has been, so I was like, I didn't drink for 2 years for other reasons. And then I was like, oh, I'm single. I'm going to start dating and I'm going to drink because that's part of, I don't know if it's part of dating, but that just makes me feel better and it'll be easier to date maybe, right? Societal norms. And
yeah. And then I was like, oh, that's not fun. So now I'm dating sober, right? And that's like a whole nother, then you really feel everything. And it's beautiful. I mean, I feel human. Like this is, for me, it's like.
It's funny. I've always dated sober. Like and not intentionally. It's just, I don't like alcohol. Yeah. It makes me really sick. I get a stomachache. I'm like, I'm a shit show of a human. I get, you know what I mean? And it's like, and it's not that like, I can look at a drink, have a sip and I'm like, ugh, I love water. I like certain drink, Coca-Cola. She's a slut for it. So it's like, I have my vices, you know, but for me, it's so funny because I hear a lot of people and they're like, I don't know, how do you date without alcohol? And it's like, oh, well, you have to be raw. You have to be very ready to show up and put your dick on the table of like, well, here I am. I can't hide behind this. And I did many a times, like early 20s, you know, right. I would get so shit faced that, you know, you wake up in the morning and you're like, did we sleep together? Like that moment of like, I don't feel sore. Like, did we do something last night? And that loss of control was too much for me because it's also scary. You don't know who these people are. But I think I've been sober dating, if you will, for the last 6-7 years. Like even to the point where people, you want to go to a bar and I'm like, I'll just get a non-alcoholic version or like, I'll just get a matcha. Like I had one date and I said that to the guy and he was like, shut the fuck up. He's like, I want a matcha with you. And we ended up just like having a really great talk. We sat for 3 hours because we were able to, like when alcohol gets involved for me, I feel it, you know, I start to feel, yes. And then you start to feel the like, whatever, who cares? Cause I don't care. And as you're taking that swig and it's like, oh, I'll care in the morning when I talk about my father for 4 hours with this person. And I did not want to do that. Right. But I think if we really want to be intentional, because at the end of the day, like you said, you're going to show up, right, authentically as yourself. And it's like, if you're hiding behind what you have in your hand, eventually you're going to have to put that down. And eventually this person's going to have to get to know you and they're going to have to get in there. Well, if you want a relationship with them. So it's like, you may as well start to put those boundaries up. Like I'm a big fan of dates that don't require alcohol, in the sense of like, me and Ryan first date went on a hike and we went to dinner. Great. People poo-pooed the hike and I was like, it was a very public hike. By no means was this like private. This was like, there was a fucking kid's school right next to it.
Yeah.
And then the second date we went to an arcade and we went out to lunch.
I love that, by the way.
You know, like
That's
we went
so
laser
fun.
tag, and like, truthfully, I'm so glad I did that because I love my partner so goddamn much, but he's very rigid. He's very like stoic, does not, like people think he's so mean. And then he starts talking and you're like, okay. So first date, I was like, I'm not really like into this. And when we hooked up, I was like, that was really fun. Second date, by having him in a different environment, that wasn't drinks, that wasn't dinner, it was daytime, it was here we are. We had so much fun because we were very childlike, you know, like we were playing laser tag and we're competing with each other. That's when I saw a different side to him. And so I think for a lot of people that are dating, you got to start to see people outside of the very comfortable environment, which is just sitting at dinner for drinks.
I'm not a big fan of going to dinner for dating. I just don't like it. It's just not me. I mean, maybe because my lifestyle is like before this, I was like walking around the house, setting up the podcast, eating banana and having a bar. Like I'm not really for my kids, I will intentionally sit down and have dinner because of the, tradition of how I want them to raise their family. But other than that, it's like I'm eating it on the go. Like I feel more comfortable when I'm moving my body, not in a sexual way, but just like moving my body.
I did yoga dates so often when I lived in LA because there was a studio called Camp that I'm obsessed with. And I would always be like, you know what, I'm going to go, because I had to go to Erewhon, of course. Like, why not? I'm going to go to class and I'm going to go to Erewhon after. Do you want to meet me? And they'd be like, yeah, absolutely. Because it's like, cool. If you're down to get sweaty with me and like you're seeing me and who I am, you're seeing me in my workout clothes, which is what I'm wearing 99% of the time. You're seeing me with very little makeup. If you like that environment and then we go out and we have a drink and we're like a smoothie and we're enjoying ourselves, well, then at that point you could put us in a padded room with nothing in there and we'd have a good time.
For sure.
But if I need the bells and the whistles to feel connected to somebody, and like, don't get me wrong, of course, sometimes it's nice to get dressed up and like go out.
Yeah.
But I think there's one, God, she's fucking Christ. There's one coach on the internet that she's just so antiquated. There's two. One says don't kiss for 3 months. That is a whole nother. I'm like, okay, girl, stay a virgin the rest of your life then, because like I would never date someone for 3 months that's not going to kiss me. That's just obscene. But there's one coach who says, if you go on a coffee date, you're low value. And I'm like, actually, I'll challenge that. I find myself quite valuable in the sense where my time is fucking worth something. And for me to get ready and go out at night and do this, for me to find out you're a dud is a waste of my night. It's a waste of my sleep schedule. Then I'm going to be off versus let me meet you for a quick coffee for 30, 45 minutes, do a vibe check. If I like you, go out again. If not, enjoy your afternoon.
100%.
It's efficient.
Yeah.
I know. I'm big on that.
So with vulnerability, like, do you find yourself, not yourself, because I don't want to put you on the spotlight, in the dating realm, like how vulnerable is being too vulnerable? And is that a beautiful thing? And because I feel like some guys get very scared and then some guys are like, oh my God, that's so beautiful.
I think there's a balance because we have to be cognizant of not trauma dumping. Mm-hmm. And I did that. I did that with a guy and he was so lovely. He was so, I cried. I was telling him a story about my brother. Like I didn't expect it. And I was just like, I even stopped. I was like, I am so sorry. Like I did not expect this to happen. And I was mortified the next day. I was like, I sent him a voice note and I was like, I'm so sorry. And he was like, it's okay. He was like, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know you well enough. I didn't know how to support you.
Oh, which is a great response.
Great. Like this guy is still one of my favorite human beings. He was always respectful, like never, ever, like he was the safest person. But think about if I did that with someone who was a narcissist, who was then like, oh, perfect. Those are your insecurities. I'll be sure to bring those out in 3 months. Because then all of a sudden you're having a fight with this person. They're like, no wonder your father left when you were a kid. And you're like, dagger to the heart.
Yeah.
So you have to be so cognizant and careful. Like I am a big fan of, you're going to ask questions like, oh, you're close with your parents and, things like that. How I would answer it at the time when I met Ryan, I'm now speaking to my dad, but at the time I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And instead of giving him a fucking soliloquy and like this whole novel and dissertation of like all the daddy issues that I have, I simply said, my father and I are not on speaking terms because unfortunately the relationship we have wasn't working for me in the way that it was going. I would love to tell you about this as we get to know each other further. But for now, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. And he just looked at me and he was like, fuck yeah. And I didn't tell him for like 4 months and then I finally started to open up of like, you want to know why I'm so anxious? And I started to tell him about like the abuse and the childhood and the things that happened. And then to the point where he's like full picture. It took me 5 months to tell him that because I didn't know you. I didn't know him. Where was I going to be?
So there's some people though, you'll say that, right? You'll set that boundary, like, you know what? No, I'm not, like, when the time feels right and I get to know you better. But then there's some people that really push, I feel like, wanting to know things that you're just like, oh God, if he finds this out, then it's going to be like,
I wish I had a red flag to just like pick up at every point when you say it's a red flag, because it's not respecting your boundaries.
Right.
If you set a boundary, because remember, a boundary is not to keep people out, it's to protect you.
Right.
So if I set a boundary with you of like, Amber, I'm sorry, but like, I can't do this on Saturday night. I'm too busy. That's not to say, go fuck yourself. That's for me to say, I can do it at 7, not 6, because I want you in my life. If I'm setting the boundary, it's to keep you there. Otherwise, if I just wanted you gone, I would have just removed myself. Mm-hmm. So when somebody does not respect your boundary, especially around, hey, I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to be sexual with you. I don't feel comfortable being intimate. I don't want to share that with you. If someone's going to push or probe or be disrespectful, then what that means is like they don't take no for an answer. Mm-hmm. And those are people that's the first thing I would suggest to people is like cancel on plans on somebody, not intentionally, just like reschedule if you have, or tell them no. Then see how they respond. Because anybody can be great in the beginning and we can all be this until you say no to somebody or trigger them at a point where then you'll either see anger or dismissive, especially if you're scared this person's a narcissist. First way you'll see is because they're not going to like you say no.
Right. It's so true. It's so true. How do you date in a culture that doesn't want to commit? Because I feel like that's very, like, we're having like a pandemic of that. Let's reframe.
Okay. Because I know what you mean. Like, I get it. I was in the trenches. I dated in New York, LA, and Miami. It's like, woof, sign me. And then San Diego, it's like, yikes.
Did you try like middle America?
I know. To think, sometimes I would do the flyover states when I go for work. I would change my thing. Unfortunately,
oh my God, that's so funny.
Then half the time, we'll talk about that off camera. But anyhow, so I think we have to look at it this way. Yes, there are a lot of people. We have a lot of people nowadays that their parents kind of fucked them up because there was a lot of people that were coddled of like, you don't do anything wrong. And it's just this fear of like, I can't be inconvenienced. I cannot be inconvenienced. So of course there are people that are non-committal and it's really just, these are people that are not doing the work on themselves to really understand like, hey, what's my fear of commitment? Like, am I scared of losing my independence? Am I scared of getting hurt? Am I scared of falling for somebody? But there's the flip side to that. Because think about, like, at least for me, my parents have been divorced for a while. Our parents' generation, a good portion of people have parents that are divorced and some people have them there together. But I think in our parents' generation, it was very like, you're 20, 22, my mom got married at 27. Like, she was old for that age. And it was very like, no, you need to do this. Like, you have to get married and you have to do this. And my mom always said, she's like, you know what we were taught? Your husband's unhappy. What are you doing wrong? How many good housekeeping magazines are how to make your man happy, how to please your man.
Yeah.
So then we have all these divorces and then we have kids like us who are like, I don't want that. So to me, I'd like to look at it as, yes, there are a lot of people that don't want to commit, but there also is this opportunity right now for us to decide who we actually want to be with. We now get to have a decision of power as women, as men, as anybody, whatever you like resonate as, to be able to say, I'm 34 without children. I'm not married, and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm okay with that because I got to wait until I was 32 to choose my partner and not just take who was out there. Did I meet a lot of people that were non-committal? Absolutely. But you know what I also figured out along the way? I was emotionally unavailable. That just because I said, well, I want a relationship, it's like, I wasn't showing up like that, because anxious people are also avoidant. Anxious people are emotionally unavailable themselves because we are so hyper-focused on the other person and what you're thinking and what you're doing, but I'm not actually looking at what I need and what's going on within me. So I would go out with these unavailable men, and instead of getting turned off and saying, okay, this doesn't match for me. Oh no, I looked at it as challenge accepted. Okay, well, let me prove it. Then all that does is reaffirm your core beliefs that you're not good enough and that you have this. So it's this perpetual cycle. So while, yeah, there are a lot of people that don't want to commit, to me, I'd rather now have the choice to walk away from those people versus being stuck in a marriage or stuck in a relationship or stuck in some kind of dynamic with a person that I married young who might be cheating on the side or has a wandering eye or doesn't want to be married. And then I'm 40 and now going, I don't know what to do, versus being in my 30s or 20s where we're like, we get choices now.
Yeah.
So it's a little, because I get it. Like, did dating apps hurt? Yes. But do they help? Yes. I met my partner on an app.
Yeah. There's so many people that I've met who have actually married. And I'm like, wait, that's amazing.
Yeah. I went to a wedding recently and they were a Bumble couple. And it's like, it happens. And
It happens.
I think it's about, we have to also like, I think when we look at that, like, oh, so many people don't want to commit. What we do is that allows us to not take accountability. We get to blame everyone else. And I used to do it. I'm not saying anything poo-poo against it, but it really means that like at the end of the day, it's like, there was a study recently, and I'm trying to remember who it was. I think Harvard may have done it, that showed you actually like the compatibility, how many things you actually need to be in a relationship are like 10% of what we actually think.
Oh, wow.
We need so little to actually be in a compatible relationship, but yet we overconflate that. And we think we need people chasing the spark and chasing a feeling. And it's like, well, if you're going to chase the feeling, guess what's fleeting? Feelings. So I think it's just about like really reframing of, okay, well, I know that not a lot of people are doing the work like I am. So that means that it's going to be a different challenge for me to meet somebody that's on the same level as me. But I'd so much rather be in a pool of kingfish and salmon. And I don't eat fish. So as you could tell, all the nice stuff versus being in the minnows and the fucking bottom feeders and that pool where I'm floating in this as well. It's okay to demand better for yourself and to not settle. But we also with that have to understand that you're not going to meet this person every single day.
Right. And also, I mean, for me, it's a little bit different because I live separately and I have kids. So moving in with someone doesn't necessarily, do I want to eventually live with someone? I thought I did, right? Because that was like the belief that I grew up coming from a religious background, or even seeing my parents still together, and being married for so long and still so young. Like I realized, wait, I like my space, and maybe that's okay. Like so my grandparents, my great grandmother and my great grandfather, they lived in the same house, but they slept in separate rooms. And I never understood that. But now I was like, oh, maybe it's just a space they needed. And that's okay. Like there's no fucking rules. Like we got to throw away all the rules, and you got to figure out what works for you and what you're willing to accept and not accept. Like, the guy that I'm currently dating, he really likes his space, and him liking his space has made me value and actually really love my space as well. And I'm like, I didn't realize that's what I needed. And so that's what he's taught me. And I'm like, and then when you come back together with a person, you're both ready to see each other, and it's just a different, I don't know. So I love it. I was like, okay, maybe I need like a fourth bedroom. So if someone moves in with me, I'm like, okay, that's your bedroom. This is mine.
We have that. We do. It's a sleep divorce, a sleep breakup, because we noticed Ryan's also 6'5". He's fucking huge. He's a big 250-pound, huge man. Mm-hmm. He snores. And it's like, and I've been single my entire adult life. I had relationships, but like I lived with one partner for like 2 months, and then I got my own place. And then my ex and I lived together for like 8-9 months. Like that's it. So for me, I've lived alone. So I've always had my bed to myself. So when we first moved in together, and I first had a queen, and I'm like, we can't even fit in this bed. So then we got a king, and I was like, every night I was looking at my Whoop, and it was like, you're getting to like an hour of restorative sleep. So finally I was like, you know what, let's give it a try. Let's do separate bedrooms. And we mimicked the beds. They're the same mattress, the same topper, the same sheets, the same everything. Mm-hmm. And we switch out every night. We alternate. Because then that way nobody has a favor, because it's like we have our master bedroom that we love.
Oh, so you'll go sleep in his room and he'll come sleep in yours?
We have, because it's the guest room.
Okay.
So by the time we realized we wanted to do this, we're like, because I would have made it my room and his room. Uh-huh. And I have a bunch of friends who are doing this with their husbands, and they're like, dude, it's great. Like he tucks me in at night. We tuck each other, like one person tucks the other person in, and then we're like, all right, love you. We go to bed, and then I wake up in the morning. Hi, good morning. And we go right back down to stairs, and we have a morning together.
That's amazing. And my grandparents were married for like, I think 50 something years. Like it was beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, I love that. And I've been with guys where they're like, I will never do that. And now I'm like, now I know why older people, and you don't have to be in your 80s to do it. It's just, and I feel like I'm saying this, I'm like, oh my God, you're getting old, Amber. But it's like, no, it's like we're changing what we're supposed to do, like what the rules are written for us, or maybe what we're trying to mirror our parents did, or a couple that we really love. But it's just, screw it. You do you.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. No. And it's like, okay, so if I look at my relationship and it's like, all right, so I see a couple that fights all the time, that pretty much hates each other. And it's like, oh, they sleep in the same room. But then I look at my partner and I'm like, we're really happy. We're super content. Like we're very fulfilled. Both of us feel real, like we're looking at rings. Like it's a thing, like we're going there. Oh, wow. I have no control over that part. That's on him. But it's very like, okay, we're like, he even said, he's like, I'd wipe you off today. Like I'm the one that's like, hey, I don't want to rush this. Like I want to enjoy this process. And I think there's nothing wrong with owning what it is that you need. So like there's a difference, but let's preface, the difference between want and need. Like for me, I needed like consistency, reciprocity, direct communication. But what I did not need was texting me every single day. I didn't need my good morning text when I've known you for one date. Like those are those moments where we have to be able to differentiate between like, it's okay to ask for your needs. But then there's also times to challenge that and be like, okay, but do I actually need this? Like this person's awesome. He shows up for me all the time. So what, he didn't text me for a day. Like, is that really the reason that I used to end things? Yeah.
I have a question, and this is like my squirrel brain. Cause you said like someone texting you after like, or the next day, good morning. But what if you sleep with that person? Because I feel like a lot of girls, sex is very different for girls than it is for guys, right? That's like the science and data is out there.
Yeah.
When you sleep with a guy and he doesn't text you the next day, I want to get your thoughts on that.
I say, okay, so like when I hooked up with Ryan, like one girl actually was like, did he text you when you got home? And he was like, I dropped you off. I was like, oh, I forgot. But like, no, he didn't text me after, he didn't say like, hey, I hope you have a great, no, I just didn't hear from him. Next morning, didn't hear from him until like the afternoon. And
okay, so he texted you the next
day. I think, listen, if you've hooked up with somebody, at the very fucking least, text them. But like, it doesn't have to be good morning. It's like, no. I don't need a good morning text, because what ends up happening is like, let's talk about the science, the brain. Our brain loves familiarity. Our brain loves shortcuts. So what ends up happening is I start texting you every morning. Good morning. Dopamine. You're getting that hit. Then if I don't do that, your brain is going through withdrawal. And then the cortisol starts to rise and the dopamine drops. And then, so when that happens, and when cortisol rises, when that stress rises, it doesn't matter how much dopamine you have. It's completely depleting all of those extra neurotransmitters because the cortisol needs it as it spikes up. So if we have somebody that is already starting to kind of do that good morning every morning, then what happens is you start to like, your body feels it's only safe if it has this person. That's why when they'll get dysregulated of like, but I haven't heard from him and I see a shift, and it's like, yeah, but that was never real. You didn't really have that person. It was just that person creating this false sense of intimacy, but it wasn't actual. Maybe you've hung out with that person once. So it's like, yes, I think if you hook up with somebody, at the very least, message them the next day at some point of like, hey, I hope you had a great day. I'd love to see you again, right? Or not. Or last night was fun. I'm just not interested. If I give the benefit of the doubt. If the next day, like, especially if you hung out like into the night, and like maybe the next day you guys were going to work, it's like, okay, if then by the second day, if you don't hear from this person, it's like, all right, I think we kind of know maybe they weren't interested in pursuing more.
Yeah.
But we also have to remember, like, just because you hook up with someone doesn't mean either one of you owe each other anything. And there's that common misconception. Like I don't know about you. I've hooked up with guys. And then the next day I'm like, I'm not into you.
Oh, right.
Right.
You're like, oh God, now I have to answer or not. And
Exactly.
I feel like, for me, I'd be like, I feel like an asshole if I didn't answer, but then I don't really want to answer. So then you just start a dialogue. And then next thing you know, they're still texting you 3 months later. And you're like, fuck, how do I get rid of this guy?
I'm like, I'm a people pleaser. I had that. There was this guy, I went on a couple of great dates with him and he was lovely, but like, I wanted to like him. He was everything on paper. Oh, he's a doctor. He has all these things. My mom's going to love him. And then we hooked up and like, it was fine. But I remember after, and I was like, okay, now I have a clear picture of you. I have a full 360. I know you in like different facets. And I remember he texted me the next day. He's like, hey, I can sense like, I haven't heard from you. Like, is everything okay? And this was after our second date. So I was like, he has anxiety. And I was honest. I said, listen, I think you're awesome. I'm not feeling this connection romantically. And he was cool. He was like, I kind of had a feeling like I really liked you. And like, then he started to tell me things where I was like, I'm glad I listened to my gut on this, because he had sexual proclivities that were definitely not mine. And that's cool. That's cool. You experiment. I'm not going to. But nonetheless, I think it's just us understanding that like there's this fucking villainization of like a woman's not allowed to pursue a man sexually as if like we have to then be in a relationship with them. And I also think that we can empower ourselves of like, but I had needs. Like when I hooked up with Ryan, I'll tell you why. Because my dog had passed away a month prior. And the guy I was dating at the time, one, completely abandoned me, like was not there when Clem passed away. And second, he had erectile dysfunction. I didn't get laid for like 2 months. I didn't get a goddamn thing. He would like that. Couldn't even have sex. And then when we would, he'd come in seconds. So I was frustrated sexually. Yeah. So when I went out with Ryan and I was like, oh, I think he has a big dick. Like, I'm going to go for it. Yeah. I just because that's why I was like, I need to get laid.
See, I'm the same way. You and I are so similar. I feel like
you know me anything.
You feel so ashamed and you're like, why? Like I told my girlfriend, I'm like, yeah, even though I'm like, I'm seeing one person right now, but I was just like, is it okay to say that like I needed the D word?
Yep. Oh, I needed to get dick down. Yeah.
And that is, why do we have to feel so ashamed to say that? It's like, oh, you feel like a horror slut. It's like, no, I actually have needs and I'm a person and I'm very open. I'm a very sexual person. Like my friends know this about me. Sometimes I have to like reel it in because I'll make comments in front of people and then people get offended and they're like, wow, can't believe that came out of Amber. But it's like, I love being intimate with people.
To me, I don't see an issue. Like, I understand there's some people are like, I can't. And it's like, great, you know yourself, right? Like, you know that you can't do this. You know that that's not going to work for you. But if you're somebody like us who's like, I can walk away from this. Like, I can hook up with you. And the next morning, like, well, thanks for that. That was fun. And truly, like, when Ryan dropped me off that night, I remember just walking in and my mom, she was like, did you have fun? And I was like, uh-huh. And like to this day now, she's like, I knew you did something. She's like, I knew you guys did. And because I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose. I never see this guy again. I had a great time. We said like 6 times that night. And I was like, we had a great time.
Wow.
I got what I needed.
Yeah.
Oh, homeboy is great. And I asked him later, I said, because what's funny is like, I wouldn't have seen him again if we didn't hook up. I didn't like him at first. Yeah. Because I thought he was, he's rigid, he's boring, he's not really opening up to me. I'm a talker. So I'm giving him stories. But the thing with Ryan is like, hopefully one day you'll meet him. He'll take a minute. So like you'll look at him and then he'll speak. And so I didn't know that about him. So I'm looking and he's just sitting there looking at me and I'm like, okay. And so I talk, and then it was when I saw little Bert and then of course having the sex with him, he was so passionate and it was so, and I was
you never know. And like someone on the outside of this is what I told the guy that I'm dating now. I was like, in society, you're perceived one way. Like you show up as one person, but in the bedroom, you're another person. And it just makes me melt.
So
like
hot.
I love that. But mine's the complete opposite. The person that I'm dating now, you would have never guessed. Like,
really?
No, like never in a million years. And I was like, oh, this is going to be like a one night stand. Yeah. I'm going to get this out of my system and move on. And I'm like, oh shit, that was good.
I swear, almost everybody I speak to now that's in like a really like that's just like, hey, I'm really enjoying this, like the married, whatever. Almost all of them are like, yeah, we had sex on the first or second date. Like, I don't remember the last time I met someone that's like, yeah, we waited 3 months to sleep together. Cause it's like, what ends up happening is when you date, and again, you want to wait, you do whatever you do you. Mm-hmm. For me personally, you think I'm going to dangle that carrot. I'm horny as shit. I'm not going to be able to withhold. But second of all, then what happens is I just wasted 3 months of my life to then find out that we're not sexually compatible. And then now I'm like, oh God, now I feel like we owe each other something. We've been invested. Maybe we met friends.
Forget it.
I don't want to do that. I'd rather get it out of the way. And then if I don't hear from them, it's like, all right, hey, thanks for letting me know your intentions. But there is a reality that like, you can like somebody and then sleep with them and after be like, our pheromones didn't match. I wasn't really intimate. I like one guy.
I love that. Our pheromones didn't match. I feel like that's a great line, by the way. If anyone needs that line,
take it. It's like the smell was off, or there was one guy and he was like really hairy in weird places that really grossed me out. And just like little things that you're like, I kind of can't overlook this. And like or I had one guy, I went on a date with him. And like, I'm very big on, I talked to Ryan on first date, like political views, religion, race, all of that. Cause it's like, why would I hide that? If you're going to be against me, let's find this out now. Or if you're with me, let's find this out now. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about, so like my childhood, my dad had a gay club and porn theaters in Midtown.
Oh,
so he came to the States and he had like 10 of them in New York. Then when he met my mom, he closed the porn, Giuliani came through, closed all the shit in Midtown and he opened the gay club. So my whole life growing up was very colorful. And like I had my mother who was this dichotomy, my father, very sex positive and porn and the theaters and gay. And it was drag queens. Like it was, who gives a shit, right? And my mom was with that, but she was very conservative of like, don't let a boy touch you. You're a slut if a boy touches you. And it was like very conflicting. So I was on a date with this guy when I lived in Venice a couple years ago, very handsome. And we're talking and we're having a good rapport. And I just asked him, I was like, so, like talk to me about like intimacy. Is that important to you in a relationship? And I'm going on of like how like I have sex often, like it's really big for me. And then he was like, I'm asexual. He was like, I really like doesn't do much for me. He was like, if I have sex once a month, like that's more than enough for me. And so then after the date, when he walked me home, I was like, I'd love to see you again. And he was honest. He was like, I don't think I'm going to satisfy you. And he was like, I can already tell you're going to have a sex drive that I know. He's like, and it's been an issue for me in the past. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I need somebody that sex is not a big deal. And that is more than okay.
That's beautiful, actually.
I had so much respect. I even said to him, I was like, thank you. I was like, man, thank you. Good people exist.
Yeah.
Because like
in LA.
In LA. Because the reality is like, there's no reason to be scared to have a conversation with somebody on a date about things that are important Because if you're not going to assess now whether or not this person's right for you or not, don't worry, in 3 to 6 to 8 months,
it's going to come out.
It's going to come out.
It's going to come out. And sometimes it doesn't come out for years. And the next thing you know, that's why people the divorce rate is where it is as one of the things. Because we just don't, there's just not enough. We just don't give ourselves enough and we hold back too much. And it's just, I'm learning that it's okay just to be you. And like for the first time in my life, I think just like realizing that for so many different reasons, it's like, fuck it. If I'm going to like show up and say X, Y, and Z, I'm okay with that.
If you are going to judge me for being intimate with you, that's a double standard, first of all. That's misogyny, because it's like, so you could do it, but I can't. Mm-hmm. I remember I asked Ryan, I said, what made you want to see me again? And he was like, the sex was amazing. He was like, we had so much fun. And he was like, you were so open and vulnerable. And he was like, and you didn't bait it or had, it wasn't, well, now you owe me anything. He's like, I felt comfortable. I felt like we had a good time. He's like, I wanted to have a good time again. And we were both very intentional of like, I want a relationship. He set boundaries throughout the way. We were both communicative. We saw each other consistently twice a week, like not as kids. So it's like easier for that. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have the texting every day. I didn't have things like that. And I had to challenge myself of like, okay, wow, you hooked up with this person. Like that doesn't mean that he lost respect for you. Mm-hmm. On the contrary, that's one of the reasons this person actually liked you as well, is because you're compatible in that way as well. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just us kind of being adults about it and not going back into this child and like this shame of you're not high value if you do this. And it's like, I'm sorry, who's in the bedroom with you? Just the two of you, right? So what the fuck do you care about other people's opinions of you and that, oh, you're not valuable because you do something? And it's like, at least I didn't waste more of my time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
So with your podcast, because I just love. What are you seeing? Like, what's trending, this year? What do you see a lot of people coming to you for questions? Because I know you have people can go and like get advice from you in different ways, right?
Yeah. Right now, still, and like a friend of mine, like she's a nervous system specialist, Masha. And so like we always do episodes together and we were talking about like the evolution. She was like, I can already tell like I'm evolving into talking more about relationships, getting away from the early stages of dating. It's like there's plenty of content on that. It's like, let's evolve, right? I'm growing, you're growing, we're all growing.
Right.
I've had people message me of like, I'm in a relationship now, like, thanks for your help. But like, now what do I do?
Right.
So I'm seeing that, but still what I get the most of is this, above all, hand over foot, is this hyperfixation on texting. If the writing is on the fucking wall, like these people, it's like, this guy doesn't do this, doesn't do this, doesn't do this, doesn't do this, and he doesn't text me. And it's like, but you're focusing on the texting. You're not looking at everything else that this person's doing. That, and probably the number one question I get at the end of everything is, what do I do? And what I've started to realize is, so many people are not understanding that you get to choose. You get to make a decision. When I was 6 as a child, I didn't get to make a choice. My father, that's the only one I got, right? So if your father, when he was yelling at us, screaming, whatever, when he was doing his shit, when he was leaving us, when he was hitting us, when he was doing all those things, you are a kid that you're like, okay, well, I can't say anything, right? I don't have a choice. I didn't get to choose you. I have to just survive. Mm-hmm. But now you're an adult. You're not dating your parents anymore. You get to make a choice. So if it's this person treating me like shit, what do I do? It's like, what would you tell your friend to do? Yeah, well, I would tell them to leave. It's like,
yeah, I feel like a lot of people, we know what to do.
We know what to do.
We know what to do. It's like I knew for years and years and years and years, I shouldn't have been in my marriage. I knew.
Yeah.
I was too ashamed. I couldn't leave. I didn't know how. I had kids. But I knew what to do. I just didn't do it.
Because for so long, because it's when we think about like, who taught you to listen to your gut? Right? Yeah. Like if you didn't have someone that's like, hey, like my mom, she's been instrumental. Like both of us are on our journey. She's in therapy. I'm in therapy. We talk all the time. And she's always been like, Sab, your gut knows. And it's like, for a long time, I didn't know how to listen to that. I would listen to my anxiety. The anxiety, like when we even just talk about the difference, gut reaction, and I know you're going to know what I mean, very calming. It's a very just that note of, this doesn't feel right. This isn't good for me. Like, But then when if we cognitively say that, like if you were to come out and be like, I'm not happy in my marriage, well, then you have to do something about it. And admitting that to yourself is often the hardest thing, because then you have to put action behind it. So we oftentimes convince ourselves otherwise. I don't want to tell my friends about this because I don't want to have to talk about it. Versus if we're just I don't even remember where I was going. This is what happened. Welcome to
Well, no.
ADHD.
So let me just say this. I think one of the most important things to do is get quiet with yourself.
Yeah.
We have so much noise and movement and like things coming at us at 100 miles an hour that taking yourself for a hike or even like
fucking meditate for 2 minutes.
Meditate. You don't even have to meditate for 20 minutes. Like I like anything.
2 minutes.
Literally
fine.
2 minutes. Like start at 2 minutes and just get quiet, because we don't live in a world where we like with the stillness inside. We have so much going on here. We have so much going on out there. It's like
got a fucking computer in your hands at all time that is telling you stuff that for decades, millennia back we didn't have. And now all of a sudden everyone has a fucking opinion and everyone's able to talk about that. And that's not
and
cool.
The answer will come.
100%. And like how I know the difference between my anxiety and my gut reaction is the anxiety comes with a narrative and a body reaction. Mm-hmm. So notice when a gut, like as a woman, I see a group of dudes at night when I'm walking in New York, I'm not thinking of like, do they think I'm pretty? But why don't you think I'm enough? No, my reaction is like, get to say, you need to get the fuck to safety. Mm-hmm. Get out. This doesn't feel safe. Go. That's your nervous system working beautifully to keep you safe, to keep you alive. We ever notice like I had a car once, like I flicked this guy off. I was driving and he chased me down the street. Like, road rage.
I don't mean to laugh, but like, I feel like that's something that like,
it's so intense, but it's so real. Like this guy was like trying to hit my car. Like it was crazy all because I literally was just like, yo, shut up. And like kept driving. And I remember, and like what I did was I really was like when I got home and the adrenaline hit and everything, we were like, I started to notice my body and I was like, interesting. The entire time my one track mind was, you need to get home to safety and don't let this guy know where you're going. I didn't have anything else trailing in my mind besides you need to get to safety, because when your nervous system kicks in and there's a real threat, you don't even have the time to think about, am I hungry? Your body doesn't know. Its only source is get them to safety, working beautifully. But when we have the anxiety, notice how it'll come with, I have heart palpitations. It's in my chest. I'm going to explode. I can't breathe. Okay. You feel like you're going to die, right? Your body's reacting to it, but then the narrative starts to play. So I didn't get a text from this person. Gut reaction might be, oh, that's weird. We'll see. Right. If I haven't heard from someone in 3 days, I might be like, that's a little weird. Where anxiety will play in of, I knew they didn't like me. That's reaffirming your core beliefs. Mm-hmm. And when we start to go on the narrative of starting to play a detective and that's when it's anxiety. And that's just because it's a fear of the future. And your body is going, I'm not safe. But because there's no real threat, it doesn't know how to seek safety. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So this happens to me. I literally had, and I think I DM'd you a couple of times asking you about like, how often do you text, or how often, like, not getting a response, like all the things that we've discussed. Now, something that I do that seems to be very helpful is like, even if I have to literally pull my car over and give myself a timeout, and I'm like, okay, you're going to focus on your breath. And I'm like, what is this really about? What is this? Because this, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's not about what's actually happening. This is a perfect example. Yesterday, Lennon comes home and we're like on a thing. We're going to walk 20 minutes every night after dinner. And she comes out and she is just like Grim Reaper, hood over the head. Her hair's like in her face. And I'm like, oh, we're having a moment. Yeah. Like, and I know there's something going on, and she doesn't want to go for a walk. And she's like giving me major attitude, where I'm like, okay, here's the deal. You want to keep giving me attitude? I'm going to have to take your phone away, because I have done absolutely nothing to deserve your, like, how you're treating me, right?
Projection, essentially.
Yeah, your projection, right? And this is a pattern with all of us, not just her. So I'm like, let's go outside. And I said, oh, by the way, everyone is leaving their phones. We do not need our phones. So locked up the house, left our phones. We're walking. She's like 20 yards ahead of me and Riley and my best friend Alana. And all of a sudden she turns around and I see it, and the tears come, and it's like bawling. And I was like, okay, now are you ready to talk? And she's like, the therapist at the school that she sees once a week is leaving. And she was very, very hurt and upset. And it's like, so my point is, once you actually peel back the layers, like, oh, I'm having so much anxiety that this guy did not text me back, or he didn't ask me on a second date, or I didn't get the response that I wanted. It's like, okay, stop, like separate that, and then like start to look inward. And it's amazing what comes up. And just know, I feel like for me, I've learned that feelings are just, they're not there.
Facts.
They're just they're like, I think like some guru said this. They're like clouds. They just like drift by. So they're not going to stay forever. And even if you get a piece of paper and you journal for, a few minutes, or if I'm having a bad moment and I'm like exploding on my kids, it's not really about Riley leaving the fucking trash once again there. I'm like, I have to go to my room. I have to give myself a timeout. I lay in my bed and I'm like, okay, what is this about?
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm not feeling heard because is that
right?
There's such a deeper root. And I love that you started to challenge that, because it's like, I have like a 3-step process that I go through all the fucking time.
Ooh, tell me.
So first thing I do is, what's the trigger? Like I often, I back that up. The first thing I do is take note of my body, because like I, for so long was on autopilot. I didn't understand that, like, now that I have a very secure partner and I have more calmness in my environment. My dad, for instance, came to town. I hadn't seen him in like a year and a half after we had our thing. My heart, like I could feel, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is like what I lived with my entire life that I normalized. So then when you're in that space where you're like, oh, I'm so much more attuned to like who makes me feel like, right now, calm, safe, versus who you're like, oh, this doesn't feel comfortable, right? Like I don't feel great. And so the first thing I like to do is I'll notice like what's happening in my body. Am I dysregulated? Because if I notice, like for me, I'll give you an example, trolls, fucking internet. They say, like, a woman yesterday posted this fucking, with her just 14 followers, this review of like how great my podcast is, but how much she hates me. She hates the way I speak. She hates the way I curse. She doesn't like the guests either. She doesn't like anything. And how she followed me and then unfollowed me after one episode because she doesn't like how fast I speak. And she thinks that I'm going to lose followers because of and it's like, okay. So there
was a lot going on there.
So much going on.
But it
affected me because, let's be honest, that's my core belief. I'm too much. People don't like me. They're going to figure you out. What are you going to fucking figure me out? It was just to figure me out. But it's just this, I want to be liked. I want to be chosen. I came from that environment, and it's like, okay, but I can consciously tell you in a second what that's happening. Yeah. But I didn't know that until I first was like, oh, I'm dysregulated. My shoulders are tense. My heart is racing. I'm sweating. Yeah. First thing I do is I'm like, okay, tight. Okay, we're going to regulate for a second. And I'm like, I'm going to do the shakes. I'm going to do something just to bring myself to now. I do room scans going from left to right, and you stay at eye level and you scan the room and you start to be like, there's a fence. Oh, there's my favorite flowers. You're reacclimating yourself back to your room. Okay. And that's your survival skill.
I love that.
So anything just to regulate, just to bring yourself back into this now. Then I'll be like, okay, what was the trigger, right? What happened? So your daughter said something, or the person didn't text you, or this troll said something. Then I'll stop and I'm like, okay, so it actually takes 90 seconds for an emotion to run its course. But because our thoughts keep going and going and going, you're not allowing yourself to process the emotion. So what I'll do is I'll step my clock for 3 minutes and I'll literally stop and I'll just sit and I'm like, okay, where is this feeling in my body? Like it's in my chest. Feels like a swarm of bees. And then I start to name, okay, those bees are moving fast or slow. Are they moving up or down? Where are they in your body? Because about 99% of the time when I do this with clients, by the time we're done with the 2 to 3 minutes, they're like, oh, it dissipated. Oh, it doesn't feel as bad anymore. And it's like, yeah, you're just letting yourself feel it. We're so scared of that because when we think of the amygdala feeling defucked, that feeling might be something you felt when you were a kid. And your body is like, nope, this doesn't feel comfortable. So we try to avoid it versus being like, ugh, okay, let me sit in it. Then after is when I will start to look at the thoughts. I don't think that's intellectualizing. I need to feel it in my body. First thing I'll think is like, okay, let's start to challenge some thoughts and put them on trial. It's my favorite DBT practice. So this woman said these things to me. Do I find fact in what she said? First thing I'm like, okay, no, I don't know about facts, but where did this make me feel? I'm like, this reminded me when I was 12. When I sat in middle school and those girls were fucking mean to me. God damn it, Kat Smith. I hope you're not listening to this, but you were a fucking cunt to me in middle school. And that, you know what I mean? Like, and then I remember that and I'm like, oh shit, I feel like a child right now because this person came and I feel like I'm not good enough and I have to prove myself to this person and I have to be, and I don't feel like you accept me for who I am and you're trying to change me. Okay. You can see how by the end of that woman got blocked. I didn't even entertain that.
Right.
But at the end of it, I was like, wow, okay. And if there was a 12-year-old me here right now, what would she need to hear from me? And most people do the like, you're fine, you're safe, you're okay. And I'm like, you know what she needs to hear from me? Like, I choose you. I think you're fucking awesome. I don't think you're too much. I think you're just enough. And I think that if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to find people that love you for you. Because that she doesn't need to be shamed or guilted or you're fine, keep going. It's like dismissed instead. And then by the end of it, I was like, okay, well, fuck that woman. And you can have your opinions. Good luck, Godspeed. I'm going to continue on because I now know that it's not what you said that hurt me. It's the feeling that came up because of my insecurities and inadequacies.
So great. That's so helpful.
You could do that shit all the time with work, with friends, with anything.
Yeah.
Your partner says something to you that pisses you off. That's what I do. I'll sit there and I'm like, no, it just reminded me of my dad. And I'll tell him that. I'm like, that was really dismissive. Yuri used to say things like that. And he'll be like, well, I'm so sorry. Like, what else can I say?
Yeah. You just have to pause, right? It literally is just pausing because we're so quick to react, right? And it's like, no, you have to really just, it's freaking hard, man.
It's really
really hard. I'll tell you a quick story. This morning, I was driving London to school and I needed to add 2 additional flights. I was leaving to go out of town next week and I decided I'm taking the girls with me. So I called United because you can't add them because they're minors. Yeah. So I didn't know how to merge them onto my reservations. And I haven't called so I called United. I'm on the phone with them. And all of a sudden the woman's like, I was like, I'd just like to do this on the phone with you. Or I said that to the lady and she's like, okay, well, it's going to be a $50 charge. And I was like, you're going to fucking charge me $50? And she's like, it was dead silent. London looked at me and I was like, I don't understand. Why can't you just fucking help me? It doesn't make sense. And so she's like, ma'am, please do not cuss at me.
I hate when they do that. And I'm like, got me.
And I was like, you know what? You're right. It was just a moment of I reacted in my head. Those are the thoughts that you're supposed to keep in here. Yeah. But I was so upset the woman wanted to charge me additional $50 to merge my daughters on my reservation. And I was like, it's ridiculous. So, but I paused and then eventually I apologized there because I also wanted to show London, I made a mistake.
Totally.
It was okay to say sorry and own up to my mistake.
100%.
And then before I even got off the call with her, 10 minutes later, I was like, again, I just want to apologize for, dropping the F-bomb again. And it was, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't pause and really thought about that wasn't about the woman. It was about me feeling financially insecure and someone wanting to take something from me once again.
100%.
So,
but it's so huge. And even that, if stopping and apologizing. I did that too. I had a call yesterday and I said something to him. And then the guy texted me while we were on the call and he was like, hey, I actually think it was that. And I even said, I was like, I am so sorry. I was like, that was on me. I apologize. I was like, I did not mean to lash out on you. Cause I said, I was like, stop playing stupid. I was like, you're just trying to take it was insurance. And I was like, you're just trying to take my money and you want more. And then I looked at the email and I even said, I was like, this is on me. I'm wrong. I was like, I own that. I am so sorry. I told the guy even said, he was like, it's okay. I totally understand. He was like, I totally get it. We were cool and everything. But it shows to me that strength. That is strength, not muscling through. Well, no, I'm right. And you're like, dude, you're fucking wrong. Just fucking say it.
Yeah.
And instead, and it's such a beautiful thing to show a partner, a child, to be able to take accountability. That's a huge green flag to me of when I say something to my partner and he'll look at me and he'll be like, that was not my intent, but intent without action doesn't mean shit. So you're right. I'm sorry. What can I do to do better? And it's thank you. That's
God, do you know how many relationships would be saved if people just said, I'm sorry a lot more?
And I'll do that too. He'll say something, he'll be like, babe. And I'll the defensiveness comes out where you're like, meh.
Yeah.
And I'll just stop and I'm like, first thing I'll get curious. And I ask him what was your experience through that? Because I want to know. And he's like, I got really anxious and it made me this. And I'm like, okay, that's totally valid. How could I have helped that moving forward? Because I get curious is the word of the fucking year.
Yeah. I mean, that's literally what I do. So Dr. Amen taught me that with my kids is sometimes we don't have all the answers. We don't need to solve all of our kids' problems or our partners or our friends. It's just about getting curious. And I love that you said that because it's true.
I don't know about you. I don't want anyone to solve my shit. I just want you to listen to me. Yes. Growing up, the rule in our house was just scream louder. Maybe dad will hear you. So the wound is I don't feel heard. And the other day, Ryan and I were talking about something really impactful. And he was just dismissive. And I looked at him and I was like, what's my one thing? And he looked and he was like, feeling heard. And I was like, do you think you did that in that moment? And he was like, I don't. And he took honest and he was like, at first he tried to defend himself. And I even looked at him, I said, because he was like, I was doing my best. And I said, if this is your best, I don't want to be in a relationship with you. And I said, I was like, you're selling yourself short. And he admitted, he's like, you're right. That's not my best. And I was like, no, it's a cop out. It's okay to call your partner out and support them and create a safe space where you both can grow. Because then he looked at me and he was like, thanks for calling me out. How would I know if you didn't say something? Yeah. You could do that with love.
Yeah.
And it's the same with anything. You can absolutely hold space of share with me. What was your experience? How did that land on you? Because maybe I don't know. Maybe I said something that was a little harsh. And
for me, it's tone. Sometimes I can get really spicy.
Same.
And when I get comfortable in a relationship, right? So initially, I won't say much. But then slowly as you get to know someone, I think this is everyone, your personality comes out a little bit more and you're like your intentions, but maybe it's because I'm an actress. I have no idea. But sometimes I can like get like quick or spicy or triggered and not know that my tone is going to be a reflection of how I'm really feeling inside. And then it's like, oh, I could have just said the same thing, but just said it differently, right?
Just the delivery.
Yes. Not the message, but the delivery. There you go.
That was my thing all growing up. My mom was like, it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. Like I would be reactive. I would scream. I would yell. Very hot-headed like my dad. Now I even did an episode the other day and I was listening to it and I was like, Ryan, who is that? He's like, that's you. And I was like, that's me? I was so calm and relaxed. I also think it was because I was microdosing on mushrooms. So that could have been it too. Which I
just a little bit.
I do love them. I'm not going to lie. Like I started doing that recently and if it's legal, yay. If it's not, I didn't do it. But just little things where I'm like, wow, even my mom, when I talked to her, she's like, I can feel a difference in you. There's not this manic energy anymore. It's like, there's a little girl inside me that finally feels heard. There's a little girl that finally has a voice because I'm a woman giving her one.
And you have to take care of your inner child. Like the other day I went on a hike and it literally, someone called me and they're like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, I literally said, not even thinking, I'm taking my inner child for a walk. And I was like, wow, I kind of sound nuts, but like I really was. I felt like adult Amber was nurturing and taking, and they're like, you did it by yourself. And I was like, yeah. I did.
No one else is going to do it.
And it felt, no one else is going to do it. It felt really good. So
it's wild. This whole journey is so beautiful, but I'm glad that you're also able to like implement it, because you can talk about it all day, but until it's not a lack of information, it's a lack of implementation. Until we actually say, oh, I see. So that's how I sit with an emotion. We hear therapists all the time. Can you sit with it? And you're like, no, not really. And it's like, you can. You're so much stronger than you think you are. It's just our mind is trying to protect us. So in those moments when you're like somebody will literally message me like, I'm going to die. And I'm like, no one's ever died from this. Like, you're not going to die because you didn't get a text from this person. You're going to be okay. Your body might think it will, but that's where it shows us that's the work.
I always explain to my kids, you have to deprogram yourself and then reprogram yourself like a computer or whatever it is. You have to dismantle yourself and then change your beliefs that are true to you, right? Not your parents' beliefs, not detaching from your friends' beliefs or the music you listen to, whatever it is, like you have to do that. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I love you. I adore you. Where can they find you on Instagram and socials and YouTube?
On the YouTube, the world of the tube. Sabrina.Zohar on, I do this every time because it's different names, on Insta and TikTok. Do the Work podcast on Insta and YouTube. There we go. And SabrinaZohar.com. There's no dot. It's just, there's too many usernames.
There's so many.
Pretty much Do the Work. Do the Work podcast is where you'll find
me. If you type in Do the Work, you will find her.
You'll see me.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Yay Networks.